get your hands off that door. This floor is by invitation only." The woman did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The way she said it, flat, certain, like she was correcting a child who had wandered into the wrong classroom, was enough. Nathaniel Mensa did not move his hand from the door handle right away. He stood there for a moment, the way a person does when they are deciding whether what they just heard was actually what they heard. It was. He had come straight from the funeral home on Bloor Street. His suit was the one his daughter had pressed for him the night before, and she had done her best, but grief does not lend itself to perfect creases. His tie was slightly off-center. He had not slept in 2 days. The woman standing between him and the elevator bank of the Harrington Wealth Management Building's 14th floor was named Cecily Harmon, and she had worked private client services for 11 years. She wore her hair pulled back in a way that made her face look harder than it probably was, and she held a slim tablet against her chest like a shield. "Sir," she said again, because Nathaniel had still not moved, "this floor is restricted to pre-approved clients of our premier division. If you'd like to speak with someone, the main branch is on the 2nd floor. I'm happy to have someone escort you down." He looked at her. She looked at him. Behind her, through the glass partition that separated the elevator lobby from the main floor, 2 junior advisors had stopped pretending to work. A man in a gray suit near the window. His name was Bradford Emery, though that would not matter until later. Watched with the particular stillness of someone who has decided not to get involved. Nathaniel Mensa said, "I have an appointment." Cecily Harmon's expression did not change. She had a very practiced expression for this kind of moment. Not unkind, exactly, but sealed. "Could I have your name?" Mensa. "Nathaniel." She turned to her tablet and made a show of scrolling. He could see from where he stood that she was not actually looking at anything. The screen was locked. "I'm not seeing that here," she said. "Perhaps the appointment was made through our standard branch?" "I can call down." "The appointment was made through Marcus Allen," Nathaniel said. "He's your managing director." There was a pause. Short, maybe 2 seconds, but the kind of pause that contains a lot of information. "Mr. Allen's calendar is managed by his personal assistant," Cecily said. "And I can tell you that he does not have any walk-ins scheduled today." "It's not a walk-in." "Well." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that is meant to end a conversation. "Why don't I have someone from our community banking team come up and speak with you? They're really very good, and they'd be much better placed to help with." "Community banking," Nathaniel repeated. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. He had his father's habit of going very still when he was processing something that required patience, and he had needed a great deal of patience in his 61 years, so the stillness came easily. He looked past Cecily Harmon to the floor beyond the glass. The carpet was the color of dark cedar. There were 3 original paintings on the wall nearest the window. He could not see them clearly from here, but he knew what they were. He had selected 2 of them himself. "I'd like to speak with Marcus Allen directly," he said. "Mr. Allen is in meetings all morning." "Then I'll wait." Something shifted in Cecily Harmon's face. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of recalibration, like a thermostat clicking up a degree. "I don't think you understand," she said. "This floor is not a waiting area. Access here is for pre-cleared premier clients only. If you don't have an appointment on our system—" "I have documentation," Nathaniel said. He held up a slim leather folio, the kind that looks like it has been carried for a long time because it has. "If you'd like to look at it." She glanced at the folio, then back at him. "Sir, I really don't think, Cecily." The voice came from behind her. A woman in her late 40s, dark blazer, reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead. Her name was Renata Cross, and she was the senior compliance officer on the floor, and she had been watching this exchange from the moment she came out of the copy room with a stack of files that she was no longer paying any attention to. "What's going on?" Renata said. She was looking at Nathaniel when she said it, but she was talking to Cecily. "Gentleman says he has an appointment with Mr. Allen. He's not in the system." Renata Cross looked at the folio in Nathaniel's hand, then at his face. Something moved behind her eyes, not recognition, exactly. More like a question arriving. "Can I ask your name?" she said to Nathaniel. Nathaniel O.C. Mensa. A beat. Then Renata Cross said, "Would you give me one moment, please?" And she turned and walked quickly toward the back of the floor. Cecily Harmon watched her go. Then she looked back at Nathaniel, and there was something new in her expression now. Uncertainty, which she did not like, and which made her face look slightly different, like a coat on the wrong hanger. "If you'd like to take a seat in the lobby downstairs," she said, recovering. "I can have someone call you when." "I'll wait here," Nathaniel said. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Then she took a small step to the left, positioning herself between him and the elevator lobby in a way that was not quite blocking, but was meant to be read that way. Across the floor, Bradford Emery had turned back to his computer. Or pretended to. A woman named Simone Ochterberg, junior associate, 29 years old, 4th month on the job, had stopped typing entirely. She was watching the door to the back corridor, where Renata Cross had disappeared. She would think about this moment for a long time afterward. The door opened. Marcus Allen walked out first. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, the kind of man whose suits always looked like they were made for him, even when they weren't. He was 54, and he had worked in private wealth management for 26 years. And he had been the managing director of Harrington's premier division for the last 9. He was walking very quickly. Behind him came Renata Cross, still holding her files, and behind her a younger man in a navy suit whose name was Jordan Tessier, and who served as Mr. Allen's executive assistant, and Jordan Tessier looked like someone who had been told some information, and was still in the process of deciding what to do with his face. Marcus Allen reached Nathaniel in about 8 steps. He stopped. He looked at him. Then he said Nathaniel, and extended his hand. Nathaniel shook it. "I am so sorry," Marcus said, and the way he said it covered several things at once. The weight, the conversation with Cecily Harmon, and also, genuinely, the loss of Nathaniel's mother, whose name was Abena Grace O.C. Mensa, and who had passed 4 days ago at the age of 87, and who had, according to her son and everyone who had ever spent more than 10 minutes with her, been an extraordinary woman. Cecily Harmon had not moved. She stood to the side, slightly behind Nathaniel now, and the expression on her face had changed completely. She was looking at Marcus Allen with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral. Marcus turned to her briefly. "Thank you, Cecily," he said, and his voice was pleasant, and it meant nothing good for her. Then he looked at Nathaniel again and said, "Come in, please. We've been expecting you." Nathaniel had grown up in the East End of Toronto, in a house on Woodbine Avenue, where his father had run a small tailoring shop out of the basement, and his mother had taught secondary school English for 31 years. They were not poor, but they were careful with money in the way that people are careful when they understand what money is and what it takes to get it, and how quickly it can be taken back. His father, whose name was Joseph Kweku O.C. Mensah, had come to Canada from Ghana in 1971 with $47, a 2-year study permit, and a letter from a cousin who lived in Brampton and who, it turned out, was not nearly as established as the letter had implied. Joseph had slept on the cousin's couch for 3 months, then a church basement for 2. Then he had found work, and then more work, and then a room, and then an apartment, and then, through 15 years of saving, and one very fortuitous decision to purchase a small commercial building on Queen Street East before the neighborhood became what it became. Something approaching stability. He had never stopped being careful. His son had inherited the carefulness and added to it something of his own. A gift for seeing what things would be worth before other people saw it. Nathaniel had started in commercial real estate at 24. He had moved through several firms in his 30s, building a reputation as someone who understood development not just as a financial instrument, but as something that happened to actual places where actual people lived. He had strong opinions about what those places should look like and who they should serve. Not everyone agreed with those opinions. Some people found them inconvenient. But he had turned out to be right often enough that being inconvenient had become less of a problem over time. He had founded Meridian Property Partners in 2001 with 2 other investors. By 2009, when the market did what it did, Meridian had made certain decisions in the previous 3 years that looked, in retrospect, like foresight, though at the time they had looked mostly like stubbornness. By 2015, Meridian's portfolio included 43 commercial and mixed-use properties across Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. By last year, that number was 61. Harrington Wealth Management had come into Nathaniel's life 18 months ago, through a referral from a colleague who had described Marcus Allen as someone worth knowing. Nathaniel had met with Marcus twice, once at the King Street office, once at a dinner in Yorkville, and had transferred a significant portion of his personal investment holdings to the firm's premier division shortly after. He had never been to the 14th floor. He had never needed to come in person. Everything had been handled through Marcus's team, through calls and secure documents, and the kind of quiet, efficient communication that premier division clients pay for and rarely think about. He was here today because of the box. A Bene Grace OC Mensa had kept it in the top shelf of her bedroom closet for as long as Nathaniel could remember. It was not a large box, about the size of a shoebox, but deeper, made of cedar, with a small brass latch that had always had a particular click to it that he associated with childhood and with being told not to touch things. He had never known exactly what was in it. His mother had not been secretive so much as private, which is a different thing. She had her rooms inside herself, and she kept them tidy, and she did not always need company in them. After the funeral, after the reception, after the relatives had gone home to Scarborough and Mississauga, and one aunt all the way back to Accra, Nathaniel had sat down with the box and opened it. Inside was a letter, folded in thirds on good paper, addressed to him in his mother's handwriting. There was a key, old-fashioned, with a number stamped into the shank. There were several legal documents in a separate envelope, sealed and marked with the name of a law firm he did not recognize. And there was a savings account passbook from a credit union, the kind of passbook that banks stopped issuing 20 years ago, with entries that began in 1983 and ended in 2019, when the amounts involved had apparently grown large enough that a credit union passbook was no longer the appropriate way to track them. He had read the letter twice before he fully understood it. His mother had not told him because she had not wanted it to change things. That was how she put it. "I have watched you build what you built without any of this," she wrote, "and I needed to see you do that. I needed to know that you were the kind of man who could. Now I know. And now you can decide what to do with what I'm leaving." The law firm's documents explained the rest. The credit union deposits were one piece of a larger structure that his mother had spent 37 years quietly constructing, real estate in Pickering and Ajax that she had purchased in the 80s, a small commercial strip in Oshawa, shares in 3 companies that her own mother had encouraged her to buy before she died. None of it was glamorous. All of it had compounded, steadily, the way his mother had done everything. Without drama, without announcement, without anyone watching. The total, when the lawyers had finished explaining it, was not a number that Nathaniel had expected. He had sat in the lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon and looked at the document and then out the window at the parking lot and then back at the document. The key, the lawyer explained, corresponded to a safe deposit box at the main branch of a financial institution downtown. That financial institution was Harrington Wealth Management. That was where the original certificates and the remaining physical documents were held. His mother had been a client of Harrington's private division for 19 years. She had never mentioned it. Marcus Allen's office had a view of the lake. On a clear day in June, which this was, you could see the islands, and beyond them a thin blue line that was the beginning of something larger. Nathaniel sat across from Marcus and placed the leather folio on the desk between them. "She never said a word," Nathaniel said. He was not asking Marcus to explain it. He was saying it the way you say something that is too large to fully carry, out loud, so it can be somewhere other than just inside you. Marcus nodded. "She was." He paused, choosing the word carefully. "She was one of the most deliberate people I've ever worked with. She had a plan and she followed it. She just had her own timeline for when to share it." 19 years, Nathaniel said. "She came in through a referral, 2005. Long before I was MD. I was a senior advisor then. She came in with a folder and asked a lot of very specific questions. I remember thinking she knew more about portfolio construction than I expected. He smiled slightly. She knew considerably more than I expected. She taught English, Nathaniel said. 31 years, she told me. She also told me her mother had taught her to read a balance sheet before she taught her to bake. Said her grandmother in Kumasi had to know how to count everything herself because there was no one else who would count it for her. Nathaniel looked down at the folio, then at the window. She was here, he said. She sat in this building. She preferred the third Monday of the month, when it was quieter. She would usually come in the morning, review everything, ask her questions, and leave by noon. She was always precise. She was always... Marcus stopped again. She was always kind. She brought biscuits once, at Christmas. Real ones, from a Ghanaian bakery in Scarborough. Nathaniel pressed his lips together. It was the kind of detail that catches you off guard. Not the big facts, but the small true ones. The biscuits. The third Monday of the month. The grandmother in Kumasi, who counted everything herself. He opened the folio and removed the key. Marcus pressed a button on his phone and said, "Jordan, can you let the vault team know we're coming down?" They took the elevator to the second basement level. Renata Cross came with them, and Jordan Tessier, and a quiet woman from the vault services team named Phyllis Osi. No relation, though Nathaniel noted it anyway, who had worked in this building for 22 years and who showed no expression whatsoever, which he appreciated. The safe deposit box was registered under Abina Grace Osi Mensa. When Phyllis Osi removed it from the shelf and set it on the table in the small private room adjacent to the vault, it was heavier than Nathaniel had expected. He put the key in. The lock turned with a sound that he recognized. He had heard that click before, upstairs in his parents' house on Woodbine Avenue, with his mother's voice behind it saying, "Not for now, that's for later." He opened the box. Inside were the original share certificates, the property deeds, a photograph of his grandmother that he had never seen, a formal portrait, probably 1960s. The woman sitting very straight in a chair and looking directly at the camera with an expression that was remarkably familiar. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in a piece of cloth that had once been part of a kente print, was a small envelope. Inside the envelope was a note in his mother's hand. "You already have everything you need. This is just the rest." He folded the note and put it in his jacket pocket. He sat in the small room for a while. The vault was very quiet. Phyllis Osi stood near the door without moving. Jordan Tessier waited in the hall. Marcus Allen sat across the table and did not say anything, because he understood that some moments do not require company. Eventually Nathaniel said, "My mother sat in this room, she did. Alone, as far as I know, always alone." He thought about that. His mother, on the third Monday of the month, taking the elevator down to this basement level, sitting at this table, opening this box, looking at what she had built, closing it again, going home, not telling anyone, not yet. Upstairs, in the elevator lobby of the 14th floor, things had moved very quickly, after Marcus Allen had walked Nathaniel through the glass partition. The story, as it tends to in contained spaces, had moved faster than people's attempts to control it. Simone Achterberg had heard Jordan Tessier's brief, quiet conversation with Renata Cross, outside the back corridor door. She had heard enough. She had said nothing and returned to her desk, but the thing she had heard had gone with her, and it sat there while she tried to focus on a client memo she was supposed to finish before noon. Bradford Emery had asked Cecily Harmon, quietly, what had happened. Cecily had said she wasn't sure. This was true in one sense, and not in another. The branch director, a man named Graham Turnbull, who had come in early and gone straight to a video call and had missed the entire incident, was informed by Renata Cross at 11:15. He listened. He asked 2 questions. Then he asked Renata to please close his door on her way out, and he sat at his desk for a while looking at the phone. Cecily Harmon was summoned to Graham Turnbull's office at 12:30. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. When she came out, her face was the kind of carefully blank that takes considerable effort to maintain. She went to her desk. She began composing an email. Those who worked near her desk did not ask her what had happened, because her face told them enough. and because there was a particular silence around her that suggested the morning had permanently changed the shape of things. She was placed on administrative leave by end of day. The official language was pending review of client interaction protocols. The unofficial language was the kind that passes between people in hallways and gets understood immediately. Simone Ochterberg typed the last sentence of her client memo and pressed send. Then she looked out the window at the lake, where the light was doing something particular and quiet to the water, and she thought about what she would have done if she had been standing where Cecily Harmon had been standing. What she would have said. Whether she would have said anything at all. She thought about it for a long time. Nathaniel stayed at the building until mid-afternoon. There were documents to review, and instructions to clarify, and decisions to make about how his mother's holdings would be integrated with his own. Decisions that were not urgent, but that his mother had left very clear notes about, because she had been, as Marcus Allen said, deliberate. When he finally came back up to the 14th floor, the afternoon had softened the light through the west-facing windows. Most of the advisors were at their desks or in meetings. Nobody made a point of looking at him, which he appreciated. Jordan Tessier brought him a coffee without being asked. It was the way his mother had taken it. Black, no sugar, which meant that Marcus Allen had mentioned it, or Jordan had looked it up in the file, and either way Nathaniel found it, unexpectedly, moving. He stood for a moment at the windows at the end of the floor and looked at the lake. His mother had stood at these windows. He did not know this for certain, but he knew her, and he knew she would have stood there. She would have looked at the water, the way she looked at most things. Steadily, without drama, taking it in. She had stood here, in this building, in this city, and she had counted everything herself, because her grandmother had taught her, because there was no one else who would count it for her, because that was the kind of women they were. He put his hand on the glass. The lake was very flat. The islands were a dark line at the edge of it, and beyond them the sky was that particular Canadian blue. The one that shows up in early June before the real heat arrives, clear and absolute. The kind of blue that does not apologize for itself. He had 2 daughters. The older one, Zora, was 34, and ran the communications arm of Meridian. The younger, Nadia Lena, was 30 and had just been accepted to a PhD program in economic history at the University of Toronto. She had called him on the morning of the funeral and said, "Dad, I need you to know that Grandma was so proud of you." She told me. She told me a lot, actually. And then she had not said what else his mother had told her, and he had not asked, and now he understood why. His mother had had her rooms inside herself. Now he was standing inside one of them. He took the elevator down alone. In the lobby, the afternoon foot traffic moved around him. People coming in from Front Street. People heading to the coffee kiosk near the atrium. A courier with a trolley of parcels. 2 women in suits discussing something intensely as they walked. The ordinary machinery of a building, going about its day. The receptionist on the main floor, a young man, maybe 22, who had been on his phone when Nathaniel arrived that morning, and who had therefore missed everything, gave him a polite nod as he passed. Nathaniel nodded back. Outside, the June heat was immediate. He stood on the sidewalk and loosened his tie slightly. He had a dinner that evening, his older daughter coming over with her husband and the grandchildren. And he would need to shower and change and make sure there was something decent for the children to eat. And at some point in the evening, he would probably tell Zora what he had found in the box, and she would cry, and he would probably cry too, though not right away, because he was his mother's son, and he had spent 61 years learning when to do things and when to wait. He hailed a cab. He got in. He sat back against the seat. The driver did not speak, which suited him. They moved through the downtown traffic slowly, up through the financial district toward the Gardiner, and Nathaniel looked out the window at the city. His city, the one his father had arrived in with 47 Ritz dollars and slept on a cousin's couch for 3 months to belong to. And he thought about his grandmother in Kumasi, who had had to count everything herself, and his mother who had learned from that, and his daughters who had learned from him, and the long unbroken line of it. Not wealth, exactly. Something older than that. the knowledge of what things are actually worth, and the patience to let the right moment tell you.